meeting those standards, and work with the managers then to prepare what we're calling a prospectus. So this will be a statement of evidence against each of the standards. So how are the candidate sites judged to be meeting at least a sound level of management against all of the standards on the green list. So those prospectuses will be prepared by the agency, assembling the evidence, working with the reference group. The reference group may visit the sites if need be, they will talk with stakeholders, and they will make then the judgment about whether or not the sites have met the criteria for being placed on the green list. So they will be going through that process. Then at an international level, WCPA will make sure that all of that process is sound, that we've agreed that the site should be listed, and then out of that we will recognise those sites. Initially we're going to limit the number that can be put on the green list in any 1 year, just to make it manageable for us. We're suggesting somewhere between 5 and 10 sites in any one system. And once on the green list, those sites would stay on the green list for 5 years unless something catastrophic happened to management. And then on a 5-yearly basis, there would be a process of essentially a renewal of that, assembling and presenting evidence that the sites have maintained their good standards of management over that period. So that the green list will be able to grow over time into an international list of well-managed protected areas, showing that we've achieved the standards that were set for those sites. So we're trying to keep the process simple, but also to have a robust process of checking the management against the standards to ensure that the list is credible. We expect that, so a number of these processes are laid out here. We expect that, in the first year or two, it probably won't be too difficult to identify a small number of sites that meet the list. But as it goes on, then perhaps it's going to be a little harder. Sites might be falling down in 1 or 2 areas where they need to improve to make the green list standard. And so in that case, it will be aspirational. It'll be encouraging them to say, if we can just improve this aspect of management, then we'll meet the standard. So let's try and do that, and we'll be on the green list in the next round. Again, I've talked through most of this in what I've said before around that diagram, so I won't go through that again in more detail. Just to say again, we're looking at those sites that are in that sound management level. So against each of the assessment criteria, they're in essentially the top third of performance levels. This is just an example of one of the standards in relation to management planning. And here we've got a series of standards that we've set for planning and the sort of evidence that we would want to look at to make a judgment about whether or not the site has met that list. So the brochure that we have has that high level listing of what are the broad criteria that we'll be looking at, and we will be putting up on the website the more detailed indicators that we would use to assess whether or not a site has met that standard of management. So the pilot studies that we have at the moment, as we mentioned, Colombia, and we'll be hearing from Sandra Valenzuela from WWF Colombia about progress with that in conjunction with WWF and their CATS project, which Vinod Mathur will talk about. We will then hear from some of the sites which have now indicated to us that they intend to join this process as pilot sites, and in particularly from Korea, who've made a commitment and signed an agreement with IUCN here at the World Conservation Congress. Our intent is to launch the green list in full at the World Parks Congress in 2014. And by then we hope we've worked our way through the pilot, we've ironed out all of the issues around the standards and the process that we follow. And so we look forward to being able to celebrate the initial listing of sites at Sydney in 2014 at the Congress. So that's all I wanted to say now. We'll learn a bit more when we hear examples from some of the case studies. So I'll hand back to Dave now. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. And I think I realized at the beginning of the session when I opened up, I didn't introduce myself. I'm Dave Reynolds. I'll be facilitating the workshop. I work for the Global Protected Areas Program, and I'm their Protected Area Capacity Development Specialist. Next I wanted to introduce Sandra Valenzuela. She's the, as Mark had mentioned, she's the program director for the World Wildlife Fund in Colombia. And she has also been a former director of the Amazon and Orinoco basins for Parques Nacional Colombia as well. And she's been involved in a number of management effectiveness programs, both in Colombia and Ecuador. So, Sandra?
Thank you, David. My name is Sandra Valenzuela, and I'm pleased to represent my government, National Parks Agency from Colombia, and the working group that we have been working on the pilot case and management effectiveness. So I'm really looking forward to your thoughts about our work, and hope to represent so well the country, Julia.
You will. You always.
Thanks. Colombia, as Julia and Mark were saying, has been a pilot case for the Green List initiative that basically we are looking to move a step forward, like looking for quality of the management. And for a little bit of background that is important for us, the Colombian territory is 50% terrestrial and 50% ocean for Pacific and the Caribbean. And we have 15 millions of protected areas from different categories. And from those 15 million, we have 12.5 for national protected areas for category 1 and 2. And the Green List initiative has been moving and proving how it works in the 12.5 million. So it's quite a big range of analysis that we are working for. And we have in this category 1 and 2, 56 sites managed by the National Parks Agency. So a little bit of refreshing. We have an assessment, a methodology called IMAPS, or Social Participation in Management Effectiveness Assessment, that is done in the 56 individual sites. So we have an important baseline, especially from the last two applications. And we have, in 2010, an assessment done at national level, giving us a recommendation for the corporate or the institutional management, like for policy level, and using as well the data from the sites. And for the process for Green List initiative, we took 7 of these 56 protected areas, and we defined different criteria for this selection. And we were not looking for the most significant places for conservation values. We were looking especially as a management standards in terms of areas that has a very strong pressures and threats, or areas that they are like marine, terrestrial, with the communities overlapping, like indigenous communities or Afro-Colombians, or they were with problems as with land tenure or within borders or in the buffer zones. So we have a big range of protected areas demonstrating how can we move forward to define management standards. And Colombia is an interesting case because we have these two types of assessment at the national and the site level, but we were missing a piece. Target to how to move forward for a better management, how we can move for a quality of the management, and that is the green list. So we took the green list very into our minds in terms of the momentum to really define standards for management, because we have the baseline, but how we move forward to a target. And so the green list is giving us this platform to define and to stress what is a good management, to really meet the target for the CBD, and even be the platform to provide our insights, considering the importance of the Colombia geographically, or considering the conflict that is facing by the country and how the protected areas are managing in that context. So we think that we can really provide our insight to the global world. So how is the process? The process, we constitute a working group led by Parks Agency. At the national level, we have like 3 officers, and in the 6 regions that we have 1 member from each office, from each region, sorry. So in that sense, we have a broader constituency and acknowledging of the definition of the standards at the national level. And 2 members from WWF, so we were leading all the time and drafting these management standards based on our previous knowledge and based on the 2 assessments, like the local, the site, and the national. We have different internal working meetings led by Julia as the director, with the whole management team, the national management team, and we have regional meetings as well to draft what we call as national standards and provide insight for the global standards. And we have this refining of the standards based on a few field trips, and we have the facilitation and the leadership by Mark and David. And we establish a reference group or external committee, like with members of the science, of the academia, of the Marine Research Institute, the Biodiversity Research Institute, and 2 WCPA members, one represented more like the social and the governance and the participation of different mechanisms, and one more as a science base that happened to be a former director of Parks before. And so with this in mind, we launched the process, and a very important methodology that we used was the communication. So we were all the time updating in different forums to the whole national parks rangers. So they were updated about what was going on and the importance of about participating, so we can really link the work in IUCN and the Commission with our park rangers. So as I was saying, so we took the 5 criteria that Mark was showing us about the global standards, and we start analyzing as in our context, and selecting the best managed areas from the different criteria that I told you about it. And so we revise the evidence that we had with the site assessments, and we realized that we needed more strong evidence. So that was a very good and important step, because we went back to the 7 protected areas that we select, and we reapplied the site assessment to be more critical, in good terms, to have a better evidence. So that is a very important first result for the process, that give us the opportunity, and us being Parks Agency and WWF, that we have been working together in these tools to refine the methodology and to refine the evidence as how we were moving forward in the quality of the management. And so we collect the evidence, and we were building the prospectus or the dossier that we are proving how the manage is done, and strengthening in one thing, that the evidence of new management way of doing things, and the data for the different stakeholders, because our policy is a social participation in conservation. And how we are doing right now, we are refining our standards right now. We want to have your feedback as at the end of today's session, and going back to our working group and the reference group to continue the process and refining the management standards for the country, and include some feedback for the global standards, as I'm going to show you. So I'm going to pass very quick about the different protected areas that we select and why. Gorgona is a national park in the Pacific, and has a very important design, being a marine area, and has defined a buffer zone, and working in a very participatory way with the fishermen from the coastal area in front, and has a very strong monitoring system for the conservation value, and has a scientific board for the management of the area. It's called the Science Park. Santiago, that is in front of Gorgona, that works very close and integrated management with the marine area called the previous one, Gorgona. This is a coastal in the boundary with Ecuador, and has and the importance of this site is that it has 5,000 inhabitants, and so the regulations and the management planning is in a very close relation with the black communities in the area. And the Nevados National Park, that is in the coffee growing region, and has a very important risk management system, and even this risk management system with different stakeholders is providing insights for different strategies, such as land tenure issues and tourism for the management. The Galera Sanctuary is in the Andes, but it's the origin of the Amazon, and it has a very important landscape management and 100 private reserves in the buffer zone working closely, and a very important participatory monitoring process, and a crucial livelihood strategies for the local communities. Alto Fragua in the Iguazi is a new area, and has set up a new benchmarking for creation of the protected areas, based on a very participatory decision-making and prior and informed consultation process with the communities, and has a very strong cultural values as the conservation objectives. And this area is in the corridor between the Amazon and the Andes, and has a very strong pressures and threats of the area, and is under a very political conflict area. So the importance of the management, besides the threats and the pressure, is how the park rangers and the communities are addressing these threats. And so they have different scales, governance agreements, even from municipality and district levels, including like regional, like for reducing threats due to oil and mining, and so it's a very inclusive way of managing. And Kawinari is one of the first area that has a co-management with the indigenous communities, and has a double protection, and not only for the conservation values, but also for the indigenous land, and the co-management, that is a very important thing that has the targets and objectives completely set, and the different mechanisms to how to follow up among both authorities like National Parks Agency and the communities. As a matter of learning, we want to give the feedback for the Green List initiative that one of the criteria, especially the fifth criteria, should really address more the distribution of ecosystem services as part of the quality of the area, more than individual benefits. Like for XX communities, we think that a better measure is the ecosystem services valuation and how is providing benefits for the local, for the regional communities, and the urban communities, and even the transboundary communities. Like address in a more direct way the different type of governance systems, not only for communities, but also the different stakeholders like NGOs, municipalities, governments, and other type of stakeholders. And I think we have to address not only governance, we have to include the governability, because we know that Colombia can give us standards in how to do this, but as well it can be Cambodia, or it can be different countries in Africa. And so I think we have to include it in part of the standards, and including the different demarcations of